I'll defend him. The words snapped through the courtroom like a whip. Every head turned. A few gasped. A few laughed. But most stared in confusion. Standing near the back, still wearing her maid's apron, was a young black woman, Danielle Harris. Her shoes were worn. Her voice was steady. And in her arms, she clutched a battered folder thick with paper tabs and scribbled notes. Did she just say what I think she said? Someone whispered. A man in a designer suit snorted. Probably the cleaner. Maybe she's the caterer's assistant trying to be cute. The judge blinked twice, caught off guard. He leaned forward. Excuse me? Danielle didn't hesitate. Danielle Harris, Your Honor. I'd like to stand as temporary counsel for Mr. William R. Kingsley. A hush spread through the room, followed by snickers. William Kingsley, the billionaire tech executive, sat alone at the defense table. His usual high-priced lawyer was nowhere in sight. His tie was loosened. His brow was furrowed. He slowly turned toward Danielle, eyes narrowing. You? He scoffed. You should be scrubbing the marble, not standing on it. Laughter erupted from the gallery. Even the prosecutor, a sharp-faced white woman in a gray skirt suit, smirked, arms folded, amused. She's here to clean floors, not argue law. Someone muttered loud enough to be heard. But Danielle didn't move. She stood straighter, her eyes locked on the judge. Her voice didn't shake. I've read every document in this case, Your Honor. Every contract. Every report. I believe I can present Mr. Kingsley's defense for this hearing. Just give me a chance. The prosecutor raised a hand. Your Honor, this is absurd. She's not licensed. She's not counsel. She's staff. I'm aware, the judge said slowly. He looked at Kingsley. Mr. Kingsley, your legal team has not appeared. Do you wish to proceed with this arrangement? Kingsley's nostrils flared. He looked at Danielle like she was filth on his shoe. Then at the judge. Then back at Danielle. Fine, he muttered, waving a hand. Do your worst. Danielle gave a slow nod. The laughter faded to whispers. She walked toward the defense table. The courtroom watched her like a zoo animal had broken the glass. She laid her folder down beside Kingsley, opened it, and straightened her back. She was calm. She was proud. She was hated. But she wasn't afraid. Hi, my name is Malik. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, please hit like and subscribe right now. Your support helps us shine a light on real injustice. Danielle sat alone on the train that night, her fingers still smudged with dust from scrubbing baseboards. The courtroom's laughter still echoed in her ears, just like all the other times she'd been laughed at and dismissed. But this time was different. This time, they had to listen. 3 years ago, she was a second-year student at Howard Law. Smart, sharp, focused. Her professors had said she had natural courtroom presence. She dreamed of becoming a civil rights attorney, someone who could break walls for people like her. But dreams didn't stop rent notices. Dreams didn't pay for her father's funeral when cancer hit faster than the insurance paperwork could. So she dropped out, packed her books in boxes, applied for jobs. And when the only callback she got was for a housekeeping position in a billionaire's estate, she took it. She needed a place to sleep, food to eat, a way to keep her little sister in school. Mr. Kingsley didn't know her name for the first 6 months. She was you. Sometimes Maid. Never Danielle. She kept her head down. Did the work. Cleaned the offices, polished the hardwood, made sure his imported coffee pods were always stocked. But she noticed things, conversations on speakerphone, contracts left half-printed on the copier, voices through walls. Kingsley was smart but careless with power. He assumed no one like her could understand what he was doing. What he didn't know was that Danielle never stopped studying. She spent her nights hunched over her second-hand laptop, watching court hearings on YouTube, listening to legal podcasts, reading court opinions downloaded from public archives. While other maids slept, she highlighted case law under dim kitchen lights. Her textbooks were hidden behind bleach bottles under the sink. And when Kingsley's legal troubles started to swirl, whispers of fraud, contract manipulation, offshore accounts, Danielle paid close attention. When the first court summons arrived at the house, she made a copy. Not to sell or expose, but because something told her this might be her moment. The night before the hearing, she overheard Kingsley yelling on the phone. "What do you mean you're not coming? I pay you $700,000 a year to show up." He was yelling at his lawyer, the one who didn't show up the next morning. So Danielle brought her folder with her, just in case. And when the courtroom buzzed with confusion and the judge asked who would speak for the defense, something inside her snapped open. Maybe it was her father's voice in her head. Maybe it was every slammed door, every racial slur muttered under breath. Every time she was told to stay in her place, she had stepped forward. Now, sitting on the train, her apron folded on her lap, Danielle looked at the city flashing by the window. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in that courtroom, not at that table, but she had earned her knowledge. She had prepared for this in silence, and tomorrow she would return not as someone cleaning the floor, but as the one exposing the dirt. Danielle arrived early the next morning, long before court was in session. She sat on the cold wooden bench outside the courtroom, her folder clutched to her chest, her fingers tight around its edges like a shield. Inside that folder were pages covered in highlighter, tabs, and handwritten notes. She'd spent years studying how power operated, how it cloaked itself in contracts, fine print, and procedural jargon. And now here she was about to challenge that very power. As the courtroom filled, whispers started again. Is she serious? Back again with her mop and dreams? She's just doing this for attention. Danielle didn't flinch. She knew what this was. Racism wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, voices heavy with mockery, questions that sounded like statements. You sure you belong here? The judge entered. Everyone rose. Danielle followed protocol exactly, not missing a beat. "Miss Harris," the judge said, his voice cautious. "Do you wish to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied. The prosecutor stood with a smirk already stretched across her face. "Before we begin, I'd like to remind the court that Miss Harris is not licensed and has no formal standing. This entire situation is a circus." The judge nodded. "Your objection is noted. But under emergency conditions and with the defendant's consent, she may speak. Let's proceed." Danielle stood. Her voice was clear. "On page 14 of the prosecution's evidence packet," she said, holding up a stapled document, "you'll find a revision to the joint venture contract between Kingsley Tech and Alter Holdings. This revision is central to the prosecution's fraud claim." The prosecutor folded her arms, smug. Danielle flipped open her folder. But that revision was signed from an IP address registered in Zurich. Mr. Kingsley was in Napa Valley that week attending a wine tech conference. A murmur swept through the courtroom. The prosecutor snapped, "Anyone could have faked that." Danielle nodded calmly. "Exactly. That's what I'm suggesting." The judge leaned forward. "You're saying the fraud didn't come from the defendant?" Danielle nodded again. "I'm saying someone used his absence to inject a contract revision, one that could later be used to trap him." The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence. The prosecutor tried to laugh it off. "What's next?" "The janitor wrote the merger deal." Danielle turned toward her. "No," she said softly. "But sometimes the janitor sees things no one else does because no one thinks to hide it from them." For the first time, the smirk on the prosecutor's face faded. The judge spoke. "We will pause this hearing until tomorrow to examine this new claim. Court is adjourned." As people shuffled out, a man muttered, "She's just a maid." Danielle turned slightly and looked him in the eyes. "Then imagine what I'll do when I'm more than that." And with that, she gathered her folder and walked out, quiet but not invisible. Not anymore. If you're still watching, drop a comment below. What would you do in this situation? And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that matter. Danielle didn't go home that night. She went to the only place that felt safe, an all-night diner in Newark where the waitresses knew her name and didn't ask questions. She slid into the corner booth, pulled out her folder, and opened her laptop. She replayed courtroom footage, zoomed in on the documents, reread every clause and signature. Something about the wording in that contract revision kept bothering her. It was too formal, too perfect, too European. She pulled up Kingsley Tech's previous contracts and compared them line by line. The phrasing was different. US-based documents used plain language. The revised clause used international legal dialect, specifically the kind often used in Zurich-based firms. It felt like someone had deliberately crafted it to appear legitimate while hiding a trap inside. Her heart pounded. She wrote one note in red ink: "Who benefits if Kingsley goes down?" Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "You made a hell of a scene today," said a calm male voice. Danielle's spine straightened. "Who is this?" "Let's just say someone who's seen this kind of thing before." "You're poking the wrong bear, Maid." "I'm not afraid of bears." "Good," the voice replied. "Then you'll know when one bites back." Click. She stared at the phone, her fingers trembling. But she didn't delete the number. She added it to a growing list of anonymous calls. The next morning, she took the subway to Midtown and went looking for Paul Temple, the billionaire's former assistant. He had resigned suddenly a month before the case exploded. His name was all over the original contract drafts. His co-working office had a paper sign on the door: "Office closed until further notice." Danielle tried the knob. Unlocked. Inside, the place was in disarray. A spilled coffee cup. Printer trays open. A laptop charger plugged in, but no laptop. Someone had left in a hurry. She moved slowly through the room, eyes scanning for anything useful. And then she saw it, a crumpled folder shoved beneath the desk. She pulled it out. Inside were 3 versions of the same contract, the joint venture agreement, but the metadata footers didn't match. One version listed a Zurich timestamp. Another listed New Jersey. Only one had Kingsley's digital signature. She clutched the papers like they were gold. Danielle backed out of the office, heart pounding, adrenaline rushing. As she turned to leave, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Same car she'd seen outside the courthouse yesterday. This wasn't just a setup. It was a full operation. That night, she made 3 copies of the documents. One went into her binder. One into a lockbox at a friend's place in Brooklyn. The third she wrapped in foil and hid behind frozen peas in her freezer. Just in case. She wasn't paranoid. She was prepared. They wanted her scared. But she'd seen her mother walk through fire for dignity. Now it was her turn. Danielle stepped into the courtroom the next morning with a calm that didn't match the chaos she felt inside. She carried her binder close to her chest, eyes forward, ignoring the stares and murmurs trailing her like smoke. William Kingsley didn't say a word when she sat beside him at the defense table. But he didn't sneer either. Just nodded once, like a man beginning to realize the storm wasn't passing. The judge took his seat and gestured. "Miss Harris, you may proceed." Danielle stood and opened the binder. Her voice was clear, sharp, measured. "Your Honor, yesterday I spoke about inconsistencies in the revised contract. Today I bring proof." She handed copies to the bailiff, who distributed them. "These are 3 drafts of the same joint venture agreement," she explained. "Each one contains minor differences, but what matters is the metadata." She pointed to the footnotes. One draft was created from a Zurich IP address, while Mr. Kingsley was in California. Another version and signed traces back to a New Jersey co-working space registered to Paul Temple, the plaintiff's former assistant. The prosecutor rose quickly. "Your Honor, we object to the use of unauthorized documents obtained outside proper discovery." Danielle didn't flinch. "These were left behind in an unsecured office. I have timestamped photos of where and when I found them. I also have a signed affidavit confirming the building's access logs." The judge reviewed the copies silently. Danielle continued, flipping to a tabbed page. "The phrasing in the Zurich version uses contract language typical of European firms, not U.S. corporate documents. That change was not present in any prior contracts Mr. Kingsley has signed over the last 5 years." She looked directly at the judge. "It was planted. Inserted while he was away. A legal trap disguised as a revision." The gallery whispered. A few people leaned in. Even the prosecutor's confident posture had started to crack. Danielle turned toward her client. "Mr. Kingsley, can you confirm you don't recall reviewing that exact document?" Kingsley's jaw tightened. "I don't," he admitted quietly. "My assistant prepared those. I just signed what was sent to my inbox." Danielle nodded. "Which means the system trusted to protect truth was bypassed and weaponized." The judge cleared his throat. "This is compelling. The court will recess until tomorrow to evaluate this new evidence and determine if formal fraud investigation is warranted." Danielle sat down, her chest rising slowly as the judge exited. Kingsley finally spoke. "You didn't come here to save me, did you?" She looked at him, calm and steady. No, she said. I came because they thought I wouldn't. And then she turned her eyes forward, past the whispers, past the smirks, toward whatever was coming next. Because once they start listening, you don't stop speaking. Danielle didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her mattress in her basement apartment, surrounded by papers, contracts, sticky notes, and her open laptop. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands still ink-stained from flipping through documents for hours. But her mind stayed sharp. She wasn't just chasing justice anymore, she was chasing the pattern. At 3:12 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message. No name. No greeting. You're getting close. Too close. She stared at it for a long second, then turned her phone off and slid it under a stack of legal files. Fear, she had learned, was a game. And she wasn't playing anymore. Later that morning, court resumed with more tension than ever. Reporters lined the hallway. Security was doubled. Inside, the gallery was full, some were curious, others waiting for her to fail. But none of them expected what she was about to do. Danielle stood. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a new witness. The courtroom shifted. Heads turned. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. A junior associate from Alter Holdings has stepped forward. Her name is being withheld for security, but her testimony supports the claim that the revised contract was deliberately altered. Whispers erupted. The judge banged his gavel for silence. Danielle continued. She confirms that Paul Temple received instructions to plant the fraudulent clause and reroute digital trails through European IP addresses. The prosecutor shot up. Objection. This is slander. You can't parade rumors as testimony. Danielle reached into her binder and lifted a slim envelope. Not rumors. This is a signed memo written by Martin Lyles, Alter's lead counsel. It outlines a strategy to pressure Mr. Kingsley into renegotiation through legal manipulation. She paused. The memo literally says, if resistance occurs, push legal action under pretext of misrepresentation. The courtroom went silent. Even Kingsley leaned forward, stunned. Danielle turned to the judge. We've also submitted a USB drive containing chain of custody reports and timestamp screenshots showing Paul Temple accessing the documents from Zurich, despite claiming he was in New Jersey that week. The prosecutor was quiet now. Her jaw tight, her face pale. Danielle didn't stop. One more thing, Your Honor. A financial record, wire transfer to a Swiss account labeled L Investments, matches the internal fund movement noted in Alter's financial forecast. A line item reads, projected value from litigation leverage, $23.4 million. The judge's eyes darkened. You're saying this lawsuit was designed to destroy Kingsley's business and profit from it? Danielle looked directly at him. Yes, and they counted on the fact that I was just a maid who wouldn't know how to prove it. Silence stretched like a held breath. The judge finally spoke. This court will review all evidence in full. If verified, we may be dealing with corporate fraud and conspiracy. Court adjourned. As people began to move, Kingsley leaned toward her. You just cracked their foundation. She didn't smile, didn't flinch. I'm not here to shake their walls, she said. I'm here to make sure no one builds lies on them again. A week later, the courtroom was standing room only. News cameras lined the back. Bloggers and legal analysts filled the benches. Every headline in New York read some version of the same question: can a black maid take down a billion-dollar legal trap? Danielle sat in her same seat, neat uniform, pressed collar, folder on the table. But everything else had changed. The laughter was gone. The smirks replaced with curiosity, respect, even fear. The judge cleared his throat. After reviewing the submitted evidence, including contract metadata, financial trails, and sworn testimony, this court finds sufficient reason to dismiss all charges against Mr. Kingsley. Gasps. Flashes from the press. And, the judge continued, I am recommending a formal investigation into Alter Holdings and its legal affiliates for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The prosecutor didn't even lift her head. Her confidence had withered across the hearings, replaced with silence and shadows. Kingsley sat stunned, blinking. He'd expected jail, scandal, maybe exile. He never imagined salvation would come from the maid he barely noticed. As people rose to leave, the judge turned back to Danielle. You've done something rare today, Miss Harris. You reminded this courtroom that justice doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it walks in with a mop bucket and changes everything. Danielle stood. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside, reporters swarmed her. Danielle, who trained you? Are you a licensed attorney now? Are you planning to take legal action against Alter? She didn't respond to any of them. Instead, she walked through the crowd like she had nothing to prove. Because she didn't. That night, back in her small apartment, her sister ran to her. You were on TV, the little girl screamed. You looked like a superhero. Danielle laughed, dropping her folder on the counter. Her hands were tired. Her heart was full. She pulled her sister close. No, she whispered. I just remembered who I was. The next day, a courier arrived at her door with a silver envelope. Inside, a handwritten note from Kingsley. I owe you more than freedom. I owe you respect. When you're ready, a full ride to any law school, no strings attached. And if you want to build your own firm, I'll be your first investor. Below it was a check with too many zeros to count. Danielle folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. She wasn't sure yet if she'd cash it. Not because she didn't need it, but because after everything, after the laughter, the courtroom, the silence, the whispers, she wanted to do it her way. Her name, her voice, her fight. And maybe, just maybe, she'd defend more people like her. People nobody saw coming. Because when the world underestimates a black woman with nothing to lose and the truth on her side, that's when revolutions begin. If you believe in second chances and breaking barriers, share this story. To viewers in the USA, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. Together, we can change the world.